everyone, welcome back to Novel iDeea. My name is Dea, and today we're going to talk about what I read in May. Is that better? So I didn't read very much this last month because I was traveling for a purpose. I went to Georgia and Tennessee to help my daughter pack up her house and get ready to move, and also to go with my other daughter to her graduation. And so I was busy. I was on the road or in a plane. My grandkids flew back to Idaho with me so that their mom could drive across the country without having to, think about making extra stops and all of that kind of thing. And so about that time I also got sick, and then shortly after that we had Memorial Day weekend, and I was still recovering, and it was my birthday and just some other things. Needless to say, I didn't get a lot of time, just downtime to read. And so that's very much reflected in the fact that I only have 12 books to talk about today. And I am going to do my best to not make this a long video. So let's jump in and chat about these books that I managed to read in May. The first one that I will tell you about is Travels with My Aunt by Greene. This was a buddy read with Sherry Rabinowitz, and it was my first buddy read with Sherry. We had a good time. I really was intrigued by this book at the beginning. It was making me laugh. I didn't quite know what to make of the characters at the beginning, because we have a single man in his late 30s, early 40s, who has retired from banking and is very much wrapped up in his garden and his dahlias. His mother passes away, and his aunt is supposedly his mother's sister, and she comes to the funeral, and it's one of his very first times meeting her, and yet she kind of takes over his life in many ways. She is used to traveling around and being kind of footloose and fancy free, and she encourages him and drags him along for many of her adventures, but also in doing so, they manage to get to know one another and form a friendship. However, I will never reread this book. It was overly sexualized. I'm not saying that there was sex on the page, but it was overly sexualized in what it was doing, how people were living. It was just even the aunt and the past quote unquote romances that she had had. And then at the end of the book, our main character also has committed to getting married to somebody half his age, and it kind of ruined it for me. It just feels very 60s, early 70s free love, and it wasn't enjoyable after a while. I could have forgiven it a little bit, but it was, after a certain point, it was constant throughout the rest of the story. It was not for me. It just was not for me. I probably won't be reading any more Greene. I had tried to read one other one, and I ended up DNFing it. It was a little disheartening, but I still enjoyed reading this with Sherry. And this is pretty much the only book that I took with me on my trip. And I finished it while I was there. So then I listened to 2 Mary Stewart books. I re-listened, well, I listened for the first time, but it was a reread of Thornyhold because Tiffany at Beautiful Minutia's Patreon group, that was their selected read, and I had just barely read it. I really liked Thornyhold. I've already told you about it. I'll leave a link to the video that I talked about it in, but I'll just say that I think I was the only one in our group, maybe one other person, that liked it as much as I did the first time. And I came to the conclusion that, you know what, this was probably just what I needed when it came along. It is a very quiet book in comparison to many of Mary Stewart's other writings. And it is very much about the setting, and the mystery really isn't much of a mystery. And I think that other people were expecting it to be more than it was. And whereas I just had a good time letting things unfold, and the quietness of it and the coziness of it. And it was just perfect in amongst everything else that I was reading that was so heavy at that time. So yeah, I was odd man out. Then I also listened to a short story of hers, or a novella of hers, called The Lost Ones. And it was about it had almost a in cold blood kind of feel to it. Man has escaped from prison. There's a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. This is though in England rather than in, the Midwest here in the United States. So English countryside, farmer's house. Mother-daughter are on their way somewhere, car peters out, they end up sitting on the side of the road till they notice a light in this farmhouse and make their way there, only to kind of become embroiled in this escaped prisoner. So it was fast-paced, but it's not long enough for you to really sink into the characters and the setting the way that you do in her novels. Then with Charlene and her book group, Charlene from Coffee and a Book, and her book group, which is Distant Lands, I got to co-host with her this month, and we read Michael J. Sullivan's Age of Myth. Focus. There we go. Age of Myth is the beginning of Michael J. Sullivan's Legends of the First Empire series. And it is taking place at about 3,000 years before his Rhaenyra Chronicles and Rhaenyra Revelations. It's the other way around. It's Revelations and then Chronicles. It is a finished series. There are 6 books in this series about the myths and legends that exist in Rhaenyra. This is where they come from. So this is the basis and the foundation of those legends and myths. And so this was absolutely wonderful. I love these characters. I gave it 5 stars the last time, 5 stars. And, this time really wasn't that much different. I got to experience it in a new way, in the fact that because I've now read Rhaenyra, I got to make some connections that I didn't make the first time. There is a shockwave event that happens, and the ripple effects of that are what we are reading about in this series. But this book in particular is just a fabulous setup. I think this is a really great place to start if you're trying to get into epic fantasy, because it has a very classical fantasy feel in modern day language and easy to understand. It's not a huge cast of characters. It's a large cast of characters, but it's not a huge cast of characters. And so there's no like quest, there's no big war or anything that is happening in this book. This is mainly political maneuverings, it is interpersonal relationships, and I found it absolutely lovely. And so if you are looking for something that does have that kind of classic fantasy feel, I think this is, you can't do much better. This is wonderful. Lady of the Lakes. This is by Josi Kilpack, and this is supposed to be a fictionalization of the true love story of Sir Walter Scott. And it is about him as a very young man and who he falls in love with and what happens to him and to his ability to connect with people as a result of this infatuation, love that he has at the beginning of his life. I am not a love story romance reader, and so I was very kind of cautious about this going in, but this was a recommendation from Hannah at Piles of Books. And there were things about this that felt very angsty, which is weird to say about Sir Walter Scott, who was just Walter Scott at the time. I loved the character of Walter Scott. I loved his family. I loved his love for his family. And I loved one of our other main female characters in here, and just her groundedness and her steadfastness and the way that she kind of knows her mind and isn't about to compromise on what she feels is right and good. And so there were things about it that I really loved. And then there were things about it that I couldn't get through fast enough. But overall, I really liked the book. Then finished up Anne Bronte. Is it gonna focus? This is by Maria Frawley, and this is a biography of Anne. We don't know a lot about Anne, and I thought she did an absolute bang up job being textual about what she was presenting. So she tried to make sure that whatever she said and whatever she was presenting about this character of Anne Bronte was backed up by facts and text. And so it does have a little bit of a scholastic kind of feel to it. It's not written in beautiful prose or anything like that, but it is easy to read, and it was absolutely a delight to read because of the fact that she didn't try to think what would Anne have done in this situation, or we can assume. She didn't assume anything. I read Goblin's Puzzle. This has been on my TBR several times, and so it was finally time to get it done. I picked this up at a secondhand shop when Courtney was here in town, of Courtney Reads. And when she was visiting me, we went and did a little bit of secondhand book shopping. The Adventures of a Boy with No Name, Two Girls Called Alice, and a Goblin. But there are other nefarious characters in here. The Goblin is almost helping them to solve something that will then help them to overcome what else is going on. And I will say that I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. And sometimes the humor, it didn't hit me the right way. The two that are Alice are Princess Alice and Plain Alice. One gets mistaken for the other and kidnapped by a dragon. And then we have the boy with no name who is searching for what his name is and who he really is. And so it has lots of elements that are in play. And I thought the author did really well at kind of bringing those together and making it make sense. So it did have that going for it. Y'all, I forgot a book. I completely forgot to tell you about a book. I'm so sorry. I also read in May A Lost Lady by Willa Cather, and I read it with Tiffany, Penny, and Stephanie. And it was okay. I'm losing my confidence in how much I like Willa Cather, because the last few that I have read have not been the Willa Cather that I came to know when I began reading her, which is odd because you would think that the books that I read at the beginning would hold true, but they haven't. I read O Pioneers and My Antonia just back to back. I had read them before, but I had forgotten about them. And A Lost Lady is, I thought that it was going to be like, seriously, like a mystery kind of thing. Like she was somebody that this whole town knew and loved, and that she just disappeared, and we were going to have to figure out why, and like that kind of thing. And actually, as it started out, I really liked it, and I thought that it was great, and I was really expecting to like it a lot more by the end of the book. And that just wasn't the case. It took a turn where she was everybody liked her and thought she was wonderful until some things happened that kind of began to question her morality. It just wasn't the caliber of story that I grew to love at the beginning of my Willa Cather journey. So it's been a little difficult to kind of lose that starry-eyed quality of going into a Willa Cather book, because it's just not the same. It's just not the same. So didn't want to forget that one. Had to add it in here. Thanks. Then I read or listened to The Lambs, and I believe this is by Carole George, and it was about a father and daughter, and the father was getting older and was slowing down, and he was a reader and liked poetry. He began to slow down, also kind of started to maybe lose purpose a little bit. And there was a neighbor or someone that they knew that was not going to be able to keep their small flock of sheep. I think there were 4 or 5 sheep. The father and daughter had the room for them and decided to take them, and they became almost like puppy dogs and would follow the father into the woods. She put a bench along this walk that he could rest on, and he would sit there and recite poetry, and the lambs would gather around him. And then when he passed away, it was a matter of how much longer was this something that was giving her life purpose? Was this something that was good for her to continue with? And it wasn't without hope, but it was also not inspirational, I guess, the way that I was kind of hoping that it would be. It was just very presentational, rather than really something to get your heart wrapped around. So I liked it. It's just not something that was going to be some memorable to the point where I'm going to be thinking about it for years to come. All right. And then I picked up from the library and have since bought. I found an inexpensive copy, and it is on its way because I liked it so much. And it was Niall Williams' The Time of the Child. I had read back at the beginning of my channel Niall Williams' This Is Happiness, which I absolutely loved. It was my top book of the year. This one was a Christmas story, and yet it was just exactly what I wanted to read. It is that elevated mundanity that I adore. It reminded me of Claire Keegan, almost like it was a combination of Foster and Small Things Like These. I think I liked it better. There is a child involved, time of the child, in this story that is taken in, and what happens to this community and to these people as a result of taking in this child. And really beautifully written, beautifully told. I just loved it. I loved it. So it reminded me a little bit of Small Things Like These because of the fact that it's set at Christmas time and it is about a child. And it reminded me of Foster because these people that have something missing in their lives that this child is fulfilling. And so anyway, I just loved it. I think you'll probably see it on my best of the year again. He just knocked it out of the park. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Then I got another library book. It was called The Marigold Mind Laundry. It's a translated Korean book, and I don't have it physically, so I will put the translator on the screen because I don't remember who it was. It is by Yun. I don't know which way to say it. And this was a little confusing. I don't think that the phrasing and the structure of the sentences sounded like a native English speaker had translated the work. But the reason why it was confusing was because there was this weird kind of time jump / dimension jump in it, and I never quite felt like I made that jump with the character. Like, I wanted to be back where we were at the beginning. I wanted to know more about that place and those people and where that existed, because that was never explained, and we never went back there. And yet I still liked the other part of the story too. I don't think I completely agree with the other part of the story, but it's basically about this girl who has gifts and also has a very long lifespan in our world. And she is learning that those gifts need to terminate on others and not upon herself. And in doing this, she establishes this mind laundry in this town of Marigold. And the mind laundry is basically where you are given an object, usually a shirt, and you think about all of the terrible feelings and the horrid things that have gone on in your life, and they bleed into this shirt, and then you take it and you plunge it into this stream, and all of it washes away, and you basically are left feeling clean and pure and ready to move on with life. And like I said, it was confusing enough at the beginning that I don't know that I ever really got my bearings. I don't know that I ever got my feet underneath me with it. But I still liked a lot of parts of it. And you may not be like me. you might just make that dimensional jump right along with the character. Pick it up for yourselves, find out. I read Ocean's Godori. This is by Elaine Yu Cho, and it is, I would say, YA, science fiction. I love this cover, and there it goes. I read this with Becca from Read Becca. I think it was Becca that said that she doesn't think the cover fits the story, but I do. I do think it fits the story. It's about this futuristic Korea alliance where they have almost like a feel of Star Trek, where there's this intergalactic coming together of these different worlds and species and things, where through space travel and through humans populating other planets. And Korea is highly, highly respected in this world. And they are basically the ones that brought all of that about. And our main character, Ocean, is a pilot with the Alliance, but because of some things that have happened in her past, she has been limited to a certain level of ship. She can't go above a level 4 ship. And she has her best friend Teo, who is the very wealthy, almost like Nepo baby of the main businessman and his wife that are behind the creation of the Alliance, the funding of the Alliance, and some of the other projects on other planets. They also fund those and run them. And then there's one more main character, and that is Haven, who has a special calling, in that he is a mortimian, which is like a mortician, and yet there's also a stigma that comes along with that, and he's trying, growing up, he's kind of coming into his own. It feels like a coming of age story, and there's this coming into his own of being able to deal with that stigmatism, like who he is, and really feels the call to be who he is. And yet there's also this part of him that wants to break away from what's being demanded of him also. But it's mainly about their interpersonal relationship, and the Ocean and Teo are best friends. Teo is gay, and there's nothing held back between these two. They are very much the best friends. They have been through a lot together, and it's very, very evident. And then there's Haven, who's introduced kind of into this situation and is maybe a little infatuated with Ocean and trying to find where he belongs within, this, as well as where he belongs in his own skin and life. And there's not a lot of action in here. So I think it that way, this cover is very true, but it is adventurous, and it is probably going to be action heavy in the next book. And there is some action, but not a lot. And it's mainly building the world, building the relationships. There is a little bit of spice. It's not a lot, but there is a little bit. And it's more than I think it needed. I think both Becca and I would say that the romantic parts of the book were the least successful thing. The characters are very layered, very complex, and absolutely fun to read for the most part. And then there were like these scenes that were just kind of thrown in there that I was like, I don't get it. I don't know why we need this. But other than that, I liked it. I liked the very platonic relationships, all of them, that were built with the crew, with Teo and Ocean, with Haven and Ocean, with Haven and Teo. Just all of it that we get was really, really good, other than the spice scenes that she needed to throw in there. I'm wondering if it wasn't because of the publisher, because it really didn't need it. Anyway, Ocean's Godori. Really enjoyed it, other than the love scenes, which really were minimal. I want to emphasize that. There were a couple of chapters at the beginning where we were seeing, some breakup and like a date scene, and then a chapter at the end where it was like, okay, I can flip the page. I don't need to read that. But you guys decide what you're good with. But I did like it for the most part. That was my reading in May. I would love to know if you had a favorite read in May, and I want to know why it was your favorite. Tell me what your favorite read was, but also tell me why. This little mug that I'm drinking my tea out of today, it was a gift from my daughter for my birthday. Little bunny rabbit. I love it. I didn't tell you my tea either. This is my spring and summer go-to tea. This is my blackberry sage, and I've shown it before, but I'll make sure to put a picture up. Blackberry sage tea. So that's that. thanks everybody for joining me. Thanks for sticking in here for this long, chatty catch-up. And I have a book haul coming up next. So you can come see what I picked up while I was on my travels. All right. Thanks, everyone.